Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
I'm doing fine, but I think our country's not doing so well.
No
our
way.
foreign policy's in shambles. Yesterday we were hoping we could wish people a Happy New Year and peace and prosperity. Today things have changed a whole lot. You know, we complain a lot about Trump being inconsistent. You know, he's on again, off again, and he is. Everybody recognizes that, you know, especially like in Syria. You know, we're coming home, but put more troops in, that sort of thing. But I have to say one thing. Unfortunately, the one place where I wished he would flip-flop once in a while or totally change his policy, dealing with Iran.
Yeah.
He is steady on it. He said it in the campaign, and he's very loyal to Netanyahu and to Saudi Arabia and to his own instincts. So he just says that they are the enemy, and he never lets up. And it's not like he invented this. He's adopted it. But when I think back in the history that I can remember, all the way back to 1953, you know, that was when we sort of decided that we hated Iran.
Yeah.
And it's been systematic ever since. And, you know, the Shah finally gets taken out because of our positions being too radical. And here it is now escalating constantly. And, of course, what I'm referring to now where we have such a mess is these killings that went on the weekend. The major Iranian leader that came in, he came in for solemnity.
Yeah.
He came in on a regular plane, and he came to a funeral because a bunch of people were killed. Last week, you know, there was a killing. One of our contractors got killed. It was all Iranians, all the Iranians. They never proved a thing.
Yeah.
So he came in for a funeral for the people that were killed because of our foreign policy there. And he walks in, of course, gets blown up and with an Iraq leader and an Iran leader.
Yeah.
So I think that this chaos has been tremendously increased, and it's hard to figure out how they can work their way out. But it's a hole that's been dug for a long time. But I think the hole by Trump has gotten much deeper and much faster, and there's no easy way out. But it's overall, it represents the stupidity of the interventionist foreign policy, but also specifically how the Republicans and the Democrats for 30 years longer, you know, it's just been going on forever. But in the last 3 years, though, it's been terrible, and it's led to this. And I think that the neocons must be cheering today, you know, that they're getting their way. That's exactly, you know, what was necessary. This Iranian leader deserved it with no proof whatsoever. And nobody's really on the air talking about, you know, maybe they have a just concern about the way they've been treated. Yeah, like they're totally encircled by nuclear bombs. They're not allowed to trade. We have sanctions on. We try to put on all these penalties on them. And at the same time, it's all the Iranians' fault. Anybody get killed, the Iranians did. And they're the ones. Here we are out killing people that help get rid of ISIS.
Yeah.
So it's so chaotic and so ridiculous, and it's designed by individuals. Their only goal is to destroy Iran. And that's been going on too long, and I don't think it's going to happen. I think that one big thing has happened, Daniel. I think it's the loss of credibility, our credibility. I think the empire is weakened, and that's probably going to be good on the long time. But this is a real mess, and it's going to be very, very costly. And this whole idea that our government is justifying going in and killing this Iranian is that they were committing aggression, and they were planning to kill American. And I don't think the evidence is very strong that they literally have caused the death of Americans, and that there was no proof and no concern that it doesn't look to me like they were marching in there with a plan and a strategy to blow up the embassy and kill a bunch of Americans. Once again, I think this mess has been based on lies. The lies are perpetual. The media is with them. And guess what? Can you believe it? But Republicans and Democrats basically agree with the treatment that we're giving Iran.
And if there had never been a lie told about our involvement in Iraq, maybe we would not we'd be on some shaky ground. But there's a continuous history of the Washington elites and the neocons lying through their teeth about Iraq to get us to go to war. From the babies being yanked from the incubators, that was all made up by Hill and Knowlton, a PR firm, to Saddam's mobile weapons labs, and he was going to send drones over to blow up New York. Lie after lie after lie. So our default should be they're lying again, because it's the very same people, the very same neocons. But the propaganda is so strong in the media. A lot of whoop, 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 war footing. 99% of Americans had never heard of Qasem Soleimani yesterday. Now all of a sudden he is worse than Hitler. We all got to cheer because we took him out. Terrorism has been defeated. We finally defeated terrorism. But guess what? That's not how it works. And Larry Johnson, who spoke at our conferences last year, a former CIA officer, knows a little bit about this stuff and about this area. He has a new piece out this morning that I thought was very good. And he asked a simple question. What is the end game with Iran? This is the question Trump and his advisors should have asked before giving the green light to kill the head of Iran's Quds Force, Soleimani, and the head of Iraq's Popular Mobilization Force, Muhandis. Two senior military leaders assassinated like a gangland drive-by shooting at the Baghdad International Airport without any permission from Iraq. It's absolutely insane, and Johnson is right. To what end? What is the end game? Because you're mad? Because remember, just recently, Khamenei tweeted out, you can't do a blank thing to us. So maybe Trump saw it and said, oh yeah, well, watch this. But how does that work for Americans? That's the question.
Well, the evidence is very clear that our invasion and taking over and remaking Iraq was an absolute total failure. But people will say, yeah, but we got rid of Saddam Hussein. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
Well, it all depends on how you look at it. If you think killing a lot of people needlessly and ending up with total chaos in this country, it's hardly could be claimed as a victory. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, Mahdi had to resign, who was the prime minister, and it's just total chaos in the country. And what they have done, there were factions, and one of the factions that helped get rid of, the jihadists and ISIS, we're out shooting at them. We've unified all the factions in Iraq. Maybe all this effort that we were going to introduce democracy and unify them and make them a great free country, actually, it's what we're doing now is unifying everybody, Sunnis and Shia and independents and everybody. And it's a combination, too, with the identification of Shia in Iran and Shia in Iraq. And it's all the unintended consequences and foolishness of our foreign policy, but not much talk on the television about anybody talking strategically about, well, why does this happen? Could it be a reflection of a foreign policy that is doomed to fail and do exactly opposite of what they tell us they're going to do?
And you brought it up, and this is in our title. If anything, we have united Iraq, which has been very divided. The Speaker of the Iraqi Parliament, he's the top elected Sunni in the country. He's furious too. It's not just the Shia. He said yesterday's targeting of a military commander in Iraq's armed forces near Baghdad International Airport is a flagrant breach of sovereignty and a violation of international agreements. So they're furious. The Sunnis are furious. The Shia are furious. And meanwhile, you have someone like Soleimani. And here's what the media propaganda is saying over and over again. But he's killed hundreds of Americans who were there in the early 2000s after the invasion. And Larry Johnson, who knows a thing or two about this, with a career in the CIA, he had an interesting point. He said there has never been a bit of evidence presented that Soleimani ordered the Iraqi militias to kill Americans. It's just accepted, but it's something that's never, ever been proven. Interestingly enough, the Shia attacks on troops in early Iran were pulled back because they didn't actually attack the U.S. at first because they realized that their policy goals, the Shia, were being served by our policy in Iraq anyway. The Iran was being served, so they didn't even need to attack us at first.
The lies. How about the lie in Syria that Assad gassed his own people?
Yeah.
Then we find out that the fix was in when the UN at U.S. Insistence go and they investigate it, and actually we find out the truth. But who hears about that? Who hears about the fact that Assad did not gas his own people and was all staged and all just an excuse? So this is the reason why this idea that they said they know, like this last week when there was a bombing and some people were killed. Oh, all of a sudden they said the Iranians did it. But there were reasons for 2 or 3 other groups that might have done it too. You know, that the independent and the militia people could have done this, but no, just go ahead. But fighting the machine, the propaganda machine, is really a tough business.
It's tough.
But of course, it really tends to want to shake my faith that truth does win out in the end, because truth is slow coming too often.
And you know, like a lot of the people that we end up killing, Soleimani's Quds forces were actually allied with the U.S. early on. They were with us overthrowing the Taliban, and they were very enthusiastic about overthrowing Saddam Hussein. So they were our allies at first, and then of course they become enemies. But not everyone is upset. Certainly, John Bolton is celebrating right now. Here's what he tweeted out: "Congratulations to all those involved in eliminating Qasem Soleimani. Long in the making, this was a decisive blow against Iran's malign Quds Force activities. Hope this is the first step to regime change in Iran." You know, here you have this idea that if you take out one guy, Iran is going to say, "Oh, you got us. That's it." You know, going to roll over, and it's just not the case. How would we? I mean, this is the equivalent of Iran assassinating Mike Pence, and that's how high Soleimani ranks in Iran. Highest-ranking military, a huge political force, very charismatic. How would we feel if they did it to someone like Pence? Would we roll over and say, "Oh gosh, you got us, wow, we better step back"? Or would we do something, come back with even more force? But of course, I don't think the Iranians are going to attack the U.S. head on, because that would be foolish. I think they realize that they have a lot of strength in asymmetric warfare. One of them might be just sitting back and watch, because the Iraqis want us out. If they force us out, we're going to be out of Syria too, because of the supply lines.
Well, I think that's a very important issue, and that is a couple weeks ago, at least, it came to a head, and there's going to be a vote, and there's a strong move, even before this last horrible week of a lot of killing and bombing and all, and they're getting ready to vote on expelling the United States, which I thought, fine and dandy, that's a good way to do it. We didn't leave on our own, but we don't need to be there. We didn't have any justification, and we need to leave, and it'd be good if they would expel us. And of course, the neocons would go out of their mind. But they didn't pass that yet, but that's still up for grabs. Now, with the unification of everybody over there, that might be the main thing that the Iranians can achieve, and say, look, we can't take on the world, and we're surrounded by nukes and all this, so we can't really protect ourselves in that sense. But if they work the best they can to get the truth out, but at the same sense get the unification of everybody in Iraq and say, we've had enough of your salvation for us. Yeah. We don't need any more Western salvation. So we want you out of here. We're voting. It would be great if they could get a unanimous vote. It's time for you guys to leave. And somebody will say, yeah, but what are we going to do with our billion-dollar embassy? Yeah. Who's going to be there to take care of it? Well, I'll tell you what, that would be a delight. We need that embassy like we need a hole in our head, and it looks like we're going to get a hole in our head if we're going to try to keep the embassy going. I mean, it's just such a symbol of the arrogance of our government to march in there, and we're going to help people for their own good, and that's why we're there, and we're going to teach them about democracy. And if you don't obey, this is what we do. Pompeo, I think you probably saw this. Pompeo, goes out and he complains, and we do this. He said, yes, deserves this. We have to do this and this. But we want peace with Iran. We do not want a war with Iran. And I always figure he doesn't say the last part of the sentence. We don't want a war with Iran as long as they do exactly as we tell them to do. And, it's always this, do what we say and then we'll have peace. And but his credibility isn't deserving of very much.
If he doesn't want war, assassinating their top military leaders is not a good way of sending that message.
Yeah, that's right.
But, Iran China and Russia had naval exercises just a couple of weeks ago. Our activity, our behavior, our actions in the Gulf are pushing these together. So if our goal is not to have a huge bloc allied against us, we're not doing a very good job of it.
Doing the opposite.
Yeah, the opposite. And I was thinking, if you wanted to impeach Trump, I think this would be a decent thing to do without any authorization from Congress. He sent a drone or a helicopter to assassinate a foreign political and military leader from a country with which we are not at war. We're not at war with Iran, technically, and he still killed the top leader. If that's not an abuse of power, a high crime and misdemeanor, I don't know what is.
Isn't it ironic? He does that, and nobody's going to pay any attention to that. But if he has a phone call, they imply, well, he withheld foreign aid, which is absolutely illegal and unconstitutional and damaging, and they shouldn't get a penny. He withholds it, and they want to impeach him over that because it was a quid pro quo. What was he going to get from this? This sort of thing. It's so, and all along in these last few years, I've said that's just a distraction. I'm convinced it is, all that Russiagate business, because here it is, Trump's doing what the neocons want, and yet the supporters, there's too many supporters that will not pay any attention to looking at it even-handedly.
If there is any kind of quid pro quo, it's probably Sheldon Adelson, who gave 20 or 30 million bucks to Trump, whose obsession is with propping up Netanyahu in Israel.
Yeah.
But I was just going to say, so look at it what it is now. This was a great, wonderful achievement. Then why on earth was the first thing that the U.S. said and Pence said and the State Department said, hey, if you're an American, get out of Iraq immediately?
Yeah, that was a statement precisely. I thought it makes a certain point. It is, Trump, we urge U.S. citizens to depart Iraq immediately. And I asked you, Daniel, I said, does that mean our soldiers, American citizens?
Yeah.
They are citizens. Well, that's good. But of course, we used one of those quotes before because he keeps arguing that we should come home and get away from these things and not start. But, as bad as the last administration was, Trump is working hard to surpass any intervention that they did before.
Yeah, I think that's true. And here's a guy who was elected because he said our wars were stupid. He said explicitly, he said it to Bush's brother, your brother's war was dumb in Iraq, and I wouldn't do that. I would get out of there. This is what he was elected to do. And he's finding himself at the verge of two major wars, because if the Iraqis say leave, do they think the Americans are going to say, okay, that's okay, we'll take off? So this is a major, major mistake on Trump's part. It's a major escalation. He may, if the Democrats had any sense, which they don't, he would have made the mistake that may have led to him not being elected. I mean, only Trump can defeat Trump. If the Dems had any brains, they could defeat him on this. Unfortunately, with Biden and Warren agreeing with all the propaganda about Soleimani, but then saying, but he should have done it that way. He should have sent a note first or something. No, it's not going to fly. They don't have any real opposition to the war machine. And that's the real tragedy in Washington. Democrats, Republicans, media, neocons, left neocons, they all love this stuff, but it is coming back to haunt us. We can't keep assassinating people around the world without there being some repercussions. And sadly, those of us who are forced to pay for it all are the ones that are going to pay these repercussions too.
Yes, and the policy backfire, unintended consequences, false flags. It's very hard to figure out exactly what's going on. But what we're talking about right now is the coalition that has built and is an automatic consequence of our foreign policy. Many people are unifying now against us. I think our foreign policy is doomed to fail. I think the empire will end, and that's what we're starting to see. And this is going to continue because right now, like we've been talking about, if the Iraqis vote to tell us to leave, that's going to escalate things, but eventually that represents what people are thinking about, and there will be some sympathy someplace in the world for that. But the other coalition and the breaking up of the empire also invites economic concerns too. And it's oil and gas and many of these things, but it's also financial. It's also the dollar. And those countries that identify and want to be friends of Iran, China and Russia and other countries like this, they are talking about an alternative. You say, oh no, it's impossible. The dollar's so strong it'll be never attacked. That's a fallacy too, because right now one of the problems with the dollar in the finances is there's too much debt. There's not enough debt. They run out of money for paying and buying repos in the morning, and they have to pump in tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars as emergency money. And right now, if this escalates like we say, they're already up to $1 trillion a year. It's going to go to $2 trillion a year deficit, and that's going to even push it further into a crisis that we won't be able to pay for this. So economically speaking, financially speaking, the dollar, and also militarily, we will be a paper tiger, I believe, when this time comes. In order to try to prevent that image shift from appearing, I'm really frightened about what Trump might do to show how tough he really is. And unfortunately, I want him to be more consistent. When he told us that he didn't want war, and I am always hopeful that's what his true belief is, but it hasn't applied with Iran. And that's why people who care about peace have to join in the anti-war effort and pointing out that you can still be pro-American, pro-constitutional, pro-liberty by taking a position of non-intervention and support the cause of peace and prosperity. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.